Picture a mouth, not your mouth, not a healthy mouth, a mouth that belongs to a city of 500,000 people who have just discovered sugar, really discovered it, not in the way you discover something at a market once a year, but in the way you discover a drug, and have absolutely no idea what it's doing to them. Picture that mouth multiplied by 500,000. Now fill it with black stumps and swollen gums, and the particular kind of pain that lives deep in the jaw, the kind that doesn't let you sleep, doesn't let you eat, doesn't let you think about anything except itself. The kind of pain that makes a grown man sit in a barber's chair and grip the armrest with both hands and tell himself that this time, it will be quick. It will not be quick. Add a city that smells of coal smoke and horse dung and the Thames at low tide, where the remedy for a rotten tooth involves a man gripping your head between his knees, a metal tool shaped like a medieval instrument of torture, and approximately as much formal medical training as a cobbler. Add sugar houses pouring white crystals into every market in London, cheaper every year, sweeter every year, available now to people who 10 years ago could barely afford salt. Add the fact that the word dentist doesn't exist yet, won't exist in the English language for another 70 years, and that the people who pull your teeth also cut your hair and shave your face, and the transition between those services is not always obvious. That's London in 1685, a city in the middle of the sweetest disaster in its history, with no idea it's disaster at all. We're going back tonight, not as people looking at portraits in a museum, studying the dark patches in the smiles of painted lords and ladies. We're living it. 1 week, one person, one slowly deteriorating mouth. Everything they would have seen and smelled and tasted and endured. So I make these history sleep stories, and I genuinely can't tell if you're using them to actually sleep, or if you're just the kind of person who finds the phrase pre-modern dental hygiene oddly relaxing. Either way, you're here, and that's fine, and I hope this one does whatever it is you need it to do. Get comfortable. Here we go. The first thing you should know is that your tooth has been hurting for 3 days. Not constantly. It comes and goes the way a bad tooth does, lulling you into thinking maybe it's over, maybe the worst has passed, and then hitting you again at 2 in the morning with a sharpness that makes you sit upright and press your hand against your jaw and breathe very carefully through your nose and wait for it to stop. It doesn't stop. Not completely. It settles into a low throb that you carry through the day like a small, mean animal that has decided to live inside the right side of your face. Your name is William Hart. Will to anyone who knows you well, which in London amounts to approximately 4 people. You're 17 years old, and you arrived here from Bristol 11 months ago with a letter of introduction from your father's old friend, a small bundle of clothes, and a head full of ideas about London that turned out to be mostly wrong. You sleep in an attic room above a barber-surgeons shop on the north side of Cheapside, in a bed you share with a boy named Peter Lowe from somewhere in Kent, who snores with a consistency that you've almost stopped noticing. Almost. Your master is Thomas Birch, barber-surgeon, operator for the teeth when the occasion demands, member in good standing of the Worshipful Company of Barbers, whose hall stands not 20 minutes' walk from this shop, a fact he mentions approximately once a week whether or not it is relevant to anything. The shop has a striped pole outside, red and white, which means something specific. Red for blood, white for the bandages. The barbering profession has its own heraldry, and it is, perhaps fittingly, the colours of violence and wound care. You have been apprenticed to Mr. Birch for 11 months, which means you have learned how to strop a razor and keep it sharp, how to lather a man's face without getting soap in his eyes, how to bleed a patient from the arm with a practiced cut and look calm while doing it, how to hold a bowl under a chin while someone vomits up a physic that probably wasn't going to work anyway, and how to assist at a tooth drawing without fainting. That last skill took a while, but right now it is early September, 1685, and it is not yet dawn, and your jaw is throbbing. Your eyes open to darkness. The attic ceiling above you is invisible. The single window is a rectangle of deep blue-grey, not black anymore, not quite grey, that specific colour that comes 20 minutes before the sky decides to be morning. September in London. The night's getting longer. You can feel it in the quality of the cold. The cold is the first thing. Not the sharp cold of winter. That's coming. And you'll know when it arrives because the water in the basin will freeze overnight and you'll have to break it with your fist. And you'll realise very quickly that this is a task that is hard on your knuckles and harder on your mood. But September cold is a different thing. Damp, bone deep, the kind that gets into your joints while you sleep and reminds you of it when you stand up. Peter is snoring beside you. His rhythm has not changed all night, and then your tooth reminds you it exists. It doesn't start with the sharp pain. It starts with a pulse, a gentle throb deep in the back right of your lower jaw, corresponding to a molar that has been your enemy for 3 months and has been escalating its campaign against you since Sunday. Sunday it was a twinge. Monday it was a throb. Tuesday and Wednesday it was a presence. Constant, insistent, impossible to ignore. Thursday, which is today, it is a small hot fire that has established residency in your face and is not planning to leave. You know what it is. You work in a barber-surgeon's shop. You have watched Mr. Birch pull out more than 100 teeth in 11 months. You know the progression. The ache begins, the ache deepens, the gum swells, the tooth becomes loose, the pain becomes unbearable, and eventually one of two things happens. Either you find someone to take the tooth out, or you die of an abscess. People die of abscesses. Mr. Birch had a patient last spring, a respectable draper from Cornhill, who let a rotten tooth go too long, and the infection travelled into his jaw and then into his neck, and then the man was simply dead, which is not the thing you expect to happen from a tooth. And yet here you are, living in a world where it happens regularly. You press your tongue against the aching molar. The gum is soft, slightly swollen. The tooth moves barely when you push at it. You pull your tongue away quickly. You know what that means. You're going to have to tell Mr. Birch. You've been putting this off. The smell of the attic is the smell of 2 young men who've been sleeping in the same room for 11 months. Wool blankets that absorb everything. The ghost of yesterday's tallow candle. Something that might be mice somewhere in the walls. The particular human smell of warm breath and stale sweat that becomes invisible to you by now, except in the first few seconds of consciousness, before you've adjusted. You swing your feet to the floor. The boards are cold under your bare soles. Your stockings are somewhere, probably wedged between the mattress and the wall where they always end up. You find them by feel, pull them on standing, which requires a kind of precarious one-legged balance you've gotten better at. Your breeches, your rough linen shirt, which needs washing, but washing is a Sunday activity and today is Thursday. Your waistcoat, plain brown, the colour of things that are not trying to impress anyone. Your shoes, which have a hole in the left sole that you've been meaning to take to the cobbler for 6 weeks and haven't, because there is always something more pressing. There is always something more pressing in London. Peter stirs when you move to the basin, rolls over, does not wake up. The water in the basin is cold and slightly brown, not dirty brown, just the colour that London water takes on from the pipes and the sources, none of which are what you'd call pristine. You got this water yesterday from the conduit on Cheapside, waiting in the morning queue behind a woman with 3 buckets and opinions about all of them, and a young boy who kept letting his bucket tip. You take a mouthful, rinse, spit. The cold water hits your sawtooth, and for a moment the pain spikes so sharply that you freeze with your hands gripping the basin, eyes wide in the dark, waiting for it to pass. It passes, mostly. You spit again and wipe your face with the linen cloth that hangs on the nail by the window. Downstairs, Mr. Birch is already moving. You can hear it. The particular creak of the 3rd stair, the sound of the shop door being unbarred, the small clatter of preparation that begins every working day at the same time, regardless of season, regardless of weather, regardless of the fact that his apprentice's mouth feels like a small war is being conducted inside it. The stairs are narrow and dark. You know them now without needing to see them. 12 steps. The 7th one gives a little under your right foot. If you step near the edge, the railing on the left is solid, but the one on the right wobbles, and you learned not to trust it on your 2nd week. You emerge into the back room of the shop, which serves as a preparation space, a storage area, a place to mix compounds, and a place where Mr. Birch occasionally eats his dinner standing up when he's too busy to sit down. Mr. Birch is already in the front room. He's a compact man, 52 years old, with a face like a walnut, deeply lined, slightly brown from the years before he settled indoors, with sharp grey eyes that take in everything and reveal very little. His hands are his most striking feature, wide, short-fingered, absolutely steady. You have never seen those hands shake, not when drawing a tooth, not when making a cut, not even in the cold. "You're late," he says, without looking up from the razor he's stropping on the leather belt. "You're not late. It's not yet 6. But this is what he says every morning, and you have learned that the correct response is to say nothing and get to work. You begin laying out the instruments for the day. The shop is small, 12 feet wide, and perhaps 18 deep, with a large window onto Cheapside that Mr. Birch opens every morning regardless of weather, because customers can hear you from the street if there's no glass between you. And customers hearing you means customers knowing you're open, and customers knowing you're open is the difference between a day with business and a day without. The front of the shop has the barber's chair, a substantial wooden chair with armrests set on a low platform so Mr. Birch can work without bending too much. One wall has shelves, rolled bandages, small pots of salve, an apothecary jar of what might be a pale paste and what might be something considerably more alarming. The window ledge has the polished brass basin used for shaving and for bleeding, and occasionally for more things than you want to think about, always cleaned after. On a separate shelf, lower down, partially obscured by a cloth, as if Mr. Birch doesn't want the regular customers to look at it too directly. The tooth instruments. There are several. A pelican, the main one, the instrument for extractions, a lever device with a hinged claw that catches under the crown of the tooth and uses the jaw's own architecture as a fulcrum to force the root out. A pair of extraction forceps, newer, which Mr. Birch is cautiously more favourable toward than the pelican, but uses less often out of habit. Several elevators, thin, narrow instruments for loosening a tooth before the main extraction. A small probe for examining the extent of decay. All of them at rest on their shelf, look like something a blacksmith made while in a very specific and unpleasant mood. You lay them out on the cloth in their usual order, left to right, by frequency of use. Mr. Birch likes them laid out this way, and you have learned that Mr. Birch's preferences about the layout of his instruments are not preferences so much as laws. Your tooth is still hurting, he says. This is not a question. You have not told him, but he has noticed the way you're holding your jaw slightly off-centre, the slight tightness around your right eye. A bit, you say. He looks at you then, direct, the grey eyes doing their assessment. Open your mouth. You do. He takes the probe from the instrument cloth, angles you toward the window light, which is getting better now. Proper grey morning coming in through the glass. He looks. He probes briefly at the molar. You feel the pressure, the flare of pain when the probe touches the exact spot. 3 days? He asks. 3, yes, sir. The gum is soft, some movement in the root. He puts the probe down. It wants to come out. I know. The longer you wait, the worse the root. The worse the root, the harder the extraction. I know. And the worse for the infection, if it goes further. I know, you say for the 3rd time, with the tone of someone who does, in fact, know, and who's been deploying that knowledge primarily as a reason to delay. Mr. Birch picks up the razor and goes back to stropping it. End of the day, he says. When the shop closes, we'll do it then. He says it the way he might say we'll sweep the floor or we'll count the week's takings. A thing to be done. Unpleasant, manageable, done. You nod. You spend the next 10 minutes laying out the rest of the morning's supplies with the particular focused attention of someone who is not thinking about what is going to happen at the end of the day. The first customer comes at 6:30. He's a wig maker from Milk Street. You know him by sight. He comes twice a week for a shave. His name is Fletcher. He has a large red face and opinions about the French that he shares regardless of whether you're listening, which Mr. Birch accommodates with the patience of a man who has developed profound inner resources over 30 years of being a barber. The lather goes on, the razor goes to work. Fletcher talks about the French. You stand to one side, ready to hand Mr. Birch whatever he needs, watching the razor move over the loose skin of Fletcher's jaw. This is the ordinary part of the day. The shaving, the barbering, the small commerce of men's faces in the morning. It's not where the money is. Mr. Birch makes a decent living from shaving. There are always men who need a professional shave, especially the merchants and tradespeople who need to look credible and whose hands are too full of other tasks to keep a good razor themselves. He makes money from minor surgical work, bleed-in patients on the advice of their physicians, dressing wounds, lancing the occasional abscess. But the teeth are something else. In a city where the tooth is becoming an emergency, a man who can extract a tooth becomes, in a specific and painful way, essential, not beloved. Nobody loves the tooth drawer, but essential the way a hangman is essential, necessary, accepted, not dwelt upon in polite company. Mr. Birch learned to draw teeth from his own master 30 years ago, who learned it from his master before that, in a tradition that goes back as far as the barbers have been associated with surgery, which is since the 14th century when the Company of Barbers was first granted its charter. The surgeons used to share the company with the barbers, same guild, same hall, same membership. They separated themselves off 20 years ago, the proper surgeons, those who do the serious work, amputations, setting bones, operating for the stone. left the barbers in possession of the more quotidian work, which includes the teeth. Mr. Birch has never complained about this arrangement. The surgeons can have their amputations. He has the teeth, and the teeth in this city in this decade are a growth market. The second customer of the morning arrives as Fletcher is leaving, still talking about the French. This one you don't know. A woman, maybe 35, well dressed in a dark wool gown that speaks of a tradesman's wife with money but not extravagance. She's holding her hand against the left side of her face. Her eyes are slightly too bright, the brightness of someone who didn't sleep last night. She doesn't need to say anything. The hand against the jaw says it all. "Sit down," Mr. Birch says. "Let me look." She sits. She's been trying to look composed, and she's almost manages it. The good posture, the careful hands placed in her lap, the attempt at a neutral expression. And then Mr. Birch takes the probe and touches the tooth she's been trying not to think about for 3 days, and the composure disappears completely, replaced by a sharp intake of breath and a sound that is not quite a word. "Upper left, second molar," Mr. Birch says to you as if dictating a letter. "Significant decay. The whole crown is soft." You note this, not on paper, you haven't been trusted with the notes yet, but in your head, where you've been building a kind of catalogue. Patience, teeth, what was done, what happened after. "Is it salvageable?" the woman asks, her voice slightly unsteady. Mr. Birch considers this with the same expression he brings to all difficult questions, a slight tightening around the eyes, a pause that is not hesitation but assessment. "No," he says. The woman closes her eyes. "Can it? Is there something, some compound?" "There are compounds," Mr. Birch says, in the tone of someone distinguishing between what is true and what is useful. Oil of cloves will dull the pain for a day or two. Laudanum will dull it longer, but the tooth will still rot. It will get worse. By the time you come back in a week, and you will come back in a week, the root will be deeper involved, the gum will be worse, and the extraction will be harder. I'm told," the woman says carefully, "that the extraction is unpleasant," Mr. Birch says. "Yes, I won't lie to you about that, but it's quick, and when it's done, it's done. The pain after is temporary. The pain you have now is not." There is a silence in the shop. Outside, Cheapside is coming alive. The rumble of carts over cobblestones, a vendor's voice starting up somewhere close, the morning sounds of a city that never fully slept beginning to resume its daylight personality. "Today," the woman says at last. It's not a question, more like she's talking herself into it. "If you're ready." She's not ready. Nobody is ever ready. But she nods. This is the part you have to tell you about before we go further into the day. The sound. There is a specific sound that a tooth makes when it comes out, that you cannot prepare for until you've heard it, and that you cannot unhear afterward. It is a sound that involves bone, a small, complex, wet sound, like something that was very firmly attached becoming, quickly and violently no longer attached. The first time you heard it, you felt it in your own jaw. You still feel it, every time, but now it is more distant. The way you learn to hear certain sounds in a slaughterhouse, present, acknowledged, filed under this is the nature of the work. Mr. Birch moves with economy. He does not waste gestures. He explains nothing to the patient before he begins, not because he is cruel, but because explanation prolongs the anticipation, and prolonged anticipation is its own kind of torture. He has learned this from experience. The patient knows what's coming. Telling them again just gives it more time to take up room in their chest. He prepares the pelican. You stand at the patient's left side, your hand resting lightly on her shoulder, not holding, just present, a point of contact that says you're not alone in this chair. The woman is gripping the armrests. Her knuckles are white. She's staring at the ceiling and her lips are moving very slightly, which might be prayer and might be a kind of controlled breathing and might be both. Mr. Birch positions himself. The pelican engages. The sound. The tooth is out. It takes perhaps 4 seconds from the moment the instrument touches the tooth to the moment it's in the brass bowl. 4 seconds, during which the woman makes a sound that is part shock and part pain and part, somewhere underneath, relief, because the deep ache that has been living in her jaw for days has, in the space of 4 seconds, been removed from the premises. "Hold this," Mr. Birch says, pressing a wad of linen against the bleeding socket. The woman takes it with trembling hands and holds it in place. "Bite down," he says, firmly, not loosely. She bites down. "Keep it there for the next hour, then replace it with a clean cloth. Don't eat anything hard for 2 days. No cold liquid on that side for a week." He pauses. "And come back if the bleeding doesn't stop, or if the gum swells further. Sometimes there's a fragment of root left behind. Better to know early." The woman nods, still staring at the ceiling, still pressing the cloth to her mouth with the concentrated focus of someone doing the one thing they've been told to do, and doing it with everything they have. She pays $1. This is the standard rate for a single extraction. $1 is a significant amount of money for a working person. It represents most of a day's wages for a labourer. But the alternative to paying the $1 is continuing to live inside the pain, and most people, when they've run out of ways to tolerate the pain, arrive at the conclusion that $1 is a reasonable price for its absence. She leaves, slowly, carefully, like someone who has just survived something and isn't entirely certain what to do next. Mr. Birch wipes the instrument, replaces it on the cloth, and without any visible transition returns to the razor he was stropping before she arrived. "Rinse the bowl," he says to you. You rinse the bowl. The morning proceeds, a shave, a trim, a minor bleeding procedure for a patient whose doctor has ordered it, on the theory, which Mr. Birch has never openly contradicted and privately considers to be incomplete at best, that reducing the quantity of blood in the body will reduce inflammation. The patient is a stout merchant from Bread Street who comes for this every 3 weeks and seems, at minimum, no worse for it. And then another tooth. This one is a young man, maybe your age, maybe a year older, who arrives with a companion, a friend or brother, who seems to be there primarily to prevent the patient from leaving before the thing is done. The young man himself has clearly been working up to this visit for some time. He's pale. His hands are not entirely steady. He keeps looking at the door. "Sit down," Mr. Birch says. "I'm just looking at the—" "Sit down," Mr. Birch says again. He sits down. His companion stands by the door, not blocking it exactly, but present in the way of someone who is preventing, by their mere existence, a particular course of action. The examination, the verdict, lower right, the same pattern, the same soft gum, the same familiar narrative of decay that Mr. Birch could probably recite in his sleep. "Wait," the young man says. Is there a powder, a compound, something that might what?" Mr. Birch says. "Fix it." Mr. Birch looks at him for a moment with the expression of someone who is deciding how much honesty serves the situation. "There is no compound that fixes a rotten tooth," he says. "A compound can dull the pain. It cannot unrot the tooth. The tooth is already dead. What's left is the question of how much longer you want it to sit in your head." How much longer can it? A week, 2 weeks, then it will be worse. Then I will be charging you more to extract it because the root will be further involved, and it will take longer, which means more pain, not less. The young man is quiet. "You've probably been hurting for a month," Mr. Birch says. "It's not an accusation, just an observation." "Maybe longer." The young man says nothing, which is itself a confirmation. "Get it done," the companion says from the door. The young man grips the armrests. You stand to his right side, your hand resting lightly on his shoulder. He doesn't look at the pelican. He's found a spot on the ceiling. Everyone finds a spot on the ceiling, and he's committed to it with everything he has. Mr. Birch moves. The sound. The young man makes a sound like someone who's been hit very hard and is trying very hard not to show it. His knuckles go white on the armrests. His feet come off the floor for a moment, pressing down against nothing, and then it's over. "You're done," Mr. Birch says. The young man doesn't say anything. He's breathing through his nose, short and careful, the cloth pressed to his jaw. His companion crosses the room and puts a hand on his shoulder. "You're done," he says, echoing Mr. Birch. "It's done." The young man nods. His eyes, when they come down from the ceiling, are wet. Not crying, exactly. Just the involuntary response of a body that has been through something. He pays his shilling. The companion pays it, actually, fishing it from his own coat pocket. This is a kindness. They leave. The shop is quiet for a moment. Mr. Birch puts the instrument down and says nothing, but he stands with his hands resting on the edge of the shelf for a second or two longer than the practical situation requires, which is the closest thing to a pause that you've seen from him. Then he picks up the razor again. Here is something you've learned in 11 months that nobody told you when you were in Bristol, dreaming about London, imagining a future in trade or in surgery or in something specific and magnificent. Almost everyone in this city is hurting, not dramatically, not in a way they talk about openly. But the evidence is everywhere if you know what to look at. The way men hold their jaws slightly to one side when they eat. The way women press their handkerchiefs against their cheeks in the street without noticing they're doing it. The dark patches you can see in mouths when people laugh openly. The black and brown evidence of years of decay, worn now like something just inherited from a difficult family, something lived with rather than addressed. It is 1685, and England has been sweetening itself for 50 years with the sugar that comes up the Thames from the Caribbean, where men and women you'll never meet work in conditions that don't bear close thinking about on a plantation system that runs on suffering, and the sugar comes off the ships at the wharves of London and into the sugar houses where it's refined and crystallized and packaged into the great white loaves that sit in the shops on every street in the city, wrapped in their distinctive blue paper. Sugar was expensive when your grandfather was young, a luxury for the very wealthy, a thing displayed at grand houses in elaborate centerpieces, sugar sculptures, sugar castles, to demonstrate that you had money enough to eat something purely beautiful and non-nutritional, which is the most expensive kind of statement there is. But the plantations expanded, the ships got larger, the refineries got more efficient, the price came down, Now a pound of sugar costs something a workman can afford if he budgets for it. A penny for enough to sweeten a pot of tea. Tuppence for enough to matter. And England has developed a taste, a furious, insatiable, building taste for the sweet. Sugar in the tea, sugar in the puddings, sugar-crusted fruit preserves, sugar candies, sugar plums. The confectioners of Cheapside and the Strand sell in penny sweets to anyone who walks past with a coin. Children running errands for their parents, stopping at a corner stall, spending their smallest coins on lumps of crystallized sweetness that they tuck into their cheeks like treasure. Their teeth begin to rot from the inside gently and consistently, years before anyone notices. And the thing is, the thing that would make a modern person want to grab someone by the shoulders and explain what's happening, is that they don't know. They don't know sugar is doing this. Some physicians have begun to suspect. A few pamphlets have circulated cautiously, making the connection between the new prevalence of sweet foods and the new prevalence of dental decay. But the idea has not broken into common knowledge yet. The tooth drawers know what they're seeing. Mr. Birch has views on the subject which he expresses occasionally, quietly, to no one in particular. But the public is not yet certain. What the public knows is that their teeth hurt. What they know is that tooth drawing is expensive and terrible. What they know is that there are pastes and powders and rinses and folk remedies and things whispered between neighbours, and that some of them work a little and some of them work not at all, and that London's mouths are, on average, in a state of quiet emergency. Your own tooth throbs. You press your tongue to it briefly, then pull away. "End of the day," Mr. Birch said. "You'll be in that chair yourself before dark. At 10:30, Mr. Birch sends you on an errand. Go to Parsons on Thames Street. Collect the order of oil of cloves and the compound of chalk and orris root. Tell him I want the chalk fine milled this time, not the coarse scratches. Parson is an apothecary who keeps a small shop near the river, on a street that smells permanently of the combination of everything that comes off the water and everything that happens to goods before they're stored. It is not a pleasant smell. It is the smell of commerce, salt, rot, wet rope, tallow, fish, the distant sweetness of wine casks, and underneath all of it the perpetual low note of the Thames, which in September is at a particular pitch of intensity that suggests the river is reminding you of what it actually is. You take the route that goes past the sugar refineries. This is slightly out of your way. You take it anyway. There are 3 sugar houses on the stretch of Thames Street near the Customs House, and you can smell them before you see them. It's not an unpleasant smell exactly. Sweet, yes, heavily sweet, but also there's something underneath it, something hot and slightly burned and caramelish, the smell of sugar being processed at high temperatures. It hangs over the street in a particular way, sweet steam rising from the ventilation holes, coating the nearby buildings in a faint sticky residue that you can feel on your face if you walk close enough. The buildings are tall and narrow, with large doors at ground level for the carts, and workers moving in and out in a steady stream. Men in leather aprons stained with the dark brown of raw cane sugar, carrying buckets and casks and moulds of the refined product. The great white loaves, wrapped in their blue paper, stacked onto carts for distribution across the city. You stop for a moment on the opposite side of the narrow street. A cart is being loaded. 2 men are carrying loaves out and stacking them. Each loaf is perhaps 2 feet tall, conical, dense. a substantial object representing a substantial quantity of sweetness. They move steadily, practiced, the weight familiar to their arms and backs. A small boy sits on a step near the sugar house door, maybe 9 years old. He's got a chip of hardened sugar, a scrap from the processing floor, something that broke off during handling, and he's sucking on it with the complete and uncomplicated satisfaction of a child who's found a good thing. His teeth, when you catch a glimpse, are already beginning. One front tooth, darker at the edge, the start of it. He doesn't know. Why would he know? He's 9 years old and he has a piece of sugar and the sun is on the street, and that is enough for him. You think about saying something. You don't. You keep walking. Parsons' apothecary is down 3 steps from street level, in a semi-basement shop that smells of every compound that has ever been stored or mixed there. A smell that is not precisely unpleasant and not precisely pleasant either, but is so specific that it belongs only to apothecaries. Herbs dried and crushed, resins, animal products that you've decided not to ask about too closely, mineral compounds, and underneath all of it the deep smell of old wood that has absorbed decades of spilled tinctures. Parson himself is a thin man with extraordinary hands, long-fingered, precise, the hands of someone who has spent 40 years measuring and mixing small quantities of substances that require exactness. He has spectacles that he pushes to the top of his head when he's not using them and forgets are there, so that he frequently appears to be being quietly haunted by a pair of eyeglasses. Fine-milled, you say, when you've explained the order. Not the coarse. He says the coarse scratches. The coarse scratches, Parson agrees without offence. He's not wrong, but fine milling cost more. He knows. Parson wraps the chalk compound in a square of paper, folding the corners with the practised efficiency of a man who has wrapped thousands of packages. The oil of cloves goes in a small glass bottle, sealed with a cork and a wax collar. You wait while he works. The shop is not busy at this hour. One other customer, a woman examining a row of small pots along the far wall, with the concentrated attention of someone who has a very specific problem and is hoping the solution is on this particular shelf. "What's she looking for?" you ask Parson quietly while he wraps. He glances at the woman. "Toothpaste," he says, equally quiet. The toothpaste has become very popular this past year. "What's in it?" "Depends on which kind. The cheap kind. Chalk, common salt, dried sage. Rub it on with a cloth. Does something, probably not much." He ties the paper parcel with a length of string, efficiently, the knot practised. The better kind, coral powder, cuttlefish bone, pearl ash, very fine, very polished. Does more, costs considerably more. Does it work? Parson looks at you with the expression of a man who has spent 40 years working in the grey area between what works and what doesn't. "It cleans the surface," he says, "polishes, makes the breath better, removes some of the matter that accumulates between the teeth." He pauses. "Does it prevent the decay?" "I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. But people buy it. And people whose teeth last longer than average use it. Whether that's the paste or whether those are simply people who eat better, I couldn't say." He sets the parcel on the counter, the bottle beside it. "The problem," he says, apparently having decided to continue the conversation despite its having been technically concluded, "is not the cleaning. People have always cleaned their teeth after a fashion. The problem is what they're cleaning off. If you keep eating the sugar and then cleaning your teeth afterward, you're..." He makes a gesture with his long hands. a gesture that means you're closing the barn door after the horse has not merely left, but has been gone for some time and is probably in the next county. The sugar gets into the tooth itself, he says, into the enamel, into the root. You can clean the outside all you like. It doesn't reach the inside. He pushes the parcel toward you. Tell Mr. Birch I made the chalk fine. He'll see the difference. Back on Thames Street, walking north toward Cheapside, the parcel under. Your arm and the bottle in your coat pocket. You think about what Parsons said. You've been thinking about teeth differently since you started working for Mr. Birch. This is the occupational deformation of working in a trade. You begin to see the world through its particular lens. A carpenter sees every piece of wood as either useful or not useful. A tailor sees every garment and its fit. You've started to look at people's mouths in a new and probably antisocial way, noticing the things that most people have the good manners to overlook. The woman selling cherries from a basket outside the conduit. When she calls out her price, you can see the gaps in her lower jaw. 3 teeth gone, at least 2 more not far behind. She's maybe 40. She looks 60 in the jaw, if not in the rest of her face. The man in the good coat crossing Cheapside ahead of you. A merchant or a lawyer, someone with money, who reaches into his waistcoat pocket as he walks and produces a silver toothpick case, extracts the toothpick, applies it to the back of his mouth with the casual practiced gesture of someone for whom oral hygiene is a small performance of refinement. The toothpick case catches the morning light. He's probably spent more on that toothpick case than most of his fellow Cheapside walkers spend on food in a week. And then his mouth, when he yawns, briefly, covering it with one hand but not quickly enough, is not particularly better than the cherry sellers. Money buys better dentifrices, better compounds, silver toothpicks instead of wooden slivers or goose quills. It does not buy immunity. Nobody in 1685 London is immune. You arrive back at the shop, deliver the parcel, the fine chalk, the oil of cloves. He made it fine, Mr. Birch asks. He said to tell you he did. Mr. Birch opens the parcel, dips a finger, rubs the chalk between his fingertips, nods. Better, he says. The afternoon brings a different kind of customer. 2 of them arrive together, a man and a woman, expensively dressed, the woman's skirts taking up a significant portion of the available floor space in the shop. These are not the local merchant class. These are higher. The silk on the woman's bodice is the kind of silk that doesn't happen cheaply, and the man's wig is of a quality that represents serious investment. They look slightly wrong in the shop, the way very expensive things look slightly wrong in utilitarian settings, as if they're aware of their own incongruity and have decided to find it amusing rather than distressing. My wife, the man says, with the tone of someone reporting a malfunction in a mechanism that he personally didn't design and therefore can't be held responsible for, has been having considerable trouble. The woman has the expression of someone who is present under protest. Her husband clearly arranged this visit. She has clearly come because the alternative was another 3 nights of lying awake, next to someone who is also lying awake, both of them pretending to sleep. I can see that, Mr. Birch says. He sees it because even at this distance, even with the careful application of cosmetics and the dignified composure that a woman of this social standing has spent years perfecting, the slight swelling on the right side of her jaw is visible, and the way she's held her head, since the moment she walked in, tilted very slightly to the left, compensating unconsciously. Sit down, Mr. Birch says. He's addressing the woman directly. She sits. She arranges her skirts with the automatic movements of a woman who manages this many times a day. She folds her hands in her lap. She looks at Mr. Birch with the expression of someone who is accustomed to being the most important person in whatever room they're in, and is deciding how to handle a room where that may not be the case. Mr. Birch examines. He's more thorough with this examination than with some, partly because the patient's station warrants it, partly because her teeth are, in ways that Mr. Birch has not seen on many patients, deeply unusual. They're very black, several of them, the upper front teeth especially, which should be the most visible, the most attended to. Not the black of total neglect, not the black of a beggar who has never washed their mouth in their life, but the specific black of teeth that have been subject to something systematic and sustained over a long period of time. Sugar. Not a gradual introduction to sugar, the way a tradesman's wife adds sweetness to her pudding. This is the sugar consumption of a household where sweetness is not an addition to food, but an ambient condition. Preserves, candied fruits, sweet wines, sugar at breakfast and dinner and supper, and as an evening comfort between meals. This is what years of that looks like in a mouth. You know, without being told what Mr. Birch is thinking. 'Cause you've read the pamphlet he keeps in his desk drawer, a medical pamphlet from 40 years ago that makes the observation that the Queen of England, 60 years before, had teeth so black they were remarkable. Queen Elizabeth, the teeth black, one foreign visitor wrote, from excessive sugar eating, a thing the English used too much of. Elizabeth had been dead for 80 years. The sugar eating had not stopped. It had gotten worse. How many of these are painful? Mr. Birch asks. 3, the woman says, in a voice that suggests she spent some time arriving at this number and has not enjoyed the process. The back 3 on the right side, the front ones, she pauses. The front ones don't hurt. They're just... She stops. Mr. Birch waits. They're just black, she finishes. Yes, Mr. Birch says. They are. Silence. The husband, standing by the window, is looking at the street outside with the concentration of someone who has found Cheapside suddenly very interesting. The back 3 will need to come out, Mr. Birch says. The front teeth. We can discuss treatments. There are compounds that will keep the surface clean. Orris root, chalk. Some people find that rubbing with a cloth dipped in charcoal powder will... Charcoal, the woman says. Activated charcoal. Very fine. It doesn't... Absolutely not, the woman says. Mr. Birch pauses. He has the expression of someone who is recalibrating. There are, he says carefully, other compounds. A paste of coral powder and pearl ash. Expensive. Very fine. A silver-tipped cloth rather than linen. Yes, the woman says, with the decisive tone of someone who's found the option that acknowledges their circumstances appropriately. But I should tell you, Mr. Birch continues, with the steady patience of someone who's navigated this particular shoal many times, that these compounds address the surface. They improve appearance. They help with the breath. They cannot undo the decay that's already present or prevent further decay if the diet remains. He stops. He looks at the husband. The husband continues to find Cheapside fascinating. If the diet remains as it is, Mr. Birch finishes, there's a very specific silence. The 3 in the back, the woman says after a moment. Today, if you wish, or you could come back. Today, she grips the armrests. The 3 extractions take perhaps 15 minutes. She is, you observe, remarkable. Her composure does not shatter. She grips the armrests. She finds her spot on the ceiling. She makes sounds that she controls with great effort. but she does not cry out, and she does not ask Mr. Birch to stop. And when it is over, she straightens in the chair with the deliberate recovery of someone who has decided that what just happened is going to be filed immediately underdone and not revisited. "The pearl ash compound," she says, while still pressing the linen cloth to her mouth, her voice slightly muffled. "Can you have it ready next week?" "I'll speak to the apothecary," Mr. Birch says. "Thursday," she says. She pays, her husband pays, producing coins from a purse with the discreet efficiency of a man making a financial transaction, go away as quickly as possible, and they leave. When the door closes, Mr. Birch is quiet for a moment. "The diet remains as it is," you say. "The diet will remain as it is," Mr. Birch says, not bitterly, just as fact. Because she won't change it. Because she cannot see why she should change it. He picks up the pelican, begins to clean it. She's not a fool. She's not stupid. She's a woman who has lived her entire life in a household where sugar is present at every meal, where sweet things are a mark of comfortable life, where serving guests a plate of candied fruit is a way of showing them that you live well. You're asking her to connect something she enjoys, and that means something socially with something that happens in her teeth, slowly and invisibly, over years. He pauses. The connection is real, but it's not easy to feel. Do you tell them, the patients, that sugar is doing this? Mr. Birch sets the pelican down. He turns and looks at you with the grey eyes that give nothing away except attention. "I tell them what I see," he says. "What they do with it is their affair." In the hour before the shop closes for the afternoon, Mr. Birch takes an hour, the late middle of the afternoon, every day for accounts and correspondence, during which time you're ostensibly setting the shop in order, but in practice have considerable latitude. You find yourself alone in the front room. You pick up the chalk compound from the shelf, Parsons' fine milled chalk, orris root for the scent, salt a little, the consistency of fine powder, slightly grey-white. You put a small amount on a square of linen cloth, the one used for demonstrations, not for patients. You rub it against your teeth. The good ones, the ones on the left side, since the right side is... You've stopped probing it. You know what it is. The chalk is fine enough that it doesn't scratch, polishes, removes something, the faint coating of the day, the residue that accumulates between morning and afternoon. Your mouth tastes of chalk and orris root. Clean, in a specific chalk and herb way that is not the same as modern clean, but is a recognisable version of the same impulse. You look at your reflection in the polished brass basin on the windowsill. Your teeth are not black. They're not perfect. Nobody's teeth are perfect in 1685. But they're not black. They're the yellowish white of teeth that belong to someone who has not yet had access to a lifetime of sugar, or at least not enough of it, long enough to have done the worst damage. The molar on the right will change that assessment when it comes out tonight. You'll have a gap. Mr. Birch lost 3 teeth before he was 30, he mentioned once, without sentiment. At his age, he's down 7 or 8 by your rough count, though you've never made a formal inventory. The gaps don't show when he's working. They're all toward the back, but you know they're there. Everyone's teeth are a map of their history with sugar and the remedies available to them, and in 1685 London, both of those histories are new and incomplete and expensive. Here is what people do about their teeth. In 1685, that is not going to the tooth drawer. They use tooth cloths, rough linen, wrapped around a finger, rubbed against the teeth each morning and sometimes evening. This is the basic practice, the most common, the most accessible. The cloth alone, without any compound, does some work. Mechanical cleaning, removing the accumulated film. Not enough, but something. They use salt, common salt dissolved in water as a rinse, or rubbed directly on the gums on the theory, which is not entirely wrong, that salt has preservative qualities. The gums respond to salt. The practice has been recommended in medical text going back further than anyone in 1685 can easily count. They use charcoal, burned wood, ground fine, mixed sometimes with salt or chalk or both. The charcoal is abrasive and it whitens. This is its main appeal among the people who use it, the whitening effect. Whether it does more than that is a matter of debate in the apothecary community, but the whitening is real, and in a world where white teeth are a mark of youth and health, the whitening is not nothing. Some people use urine, specifically the urine of children, which is recommended in folk practice as a mouth rinse, and, in some texts, a tooth cleaning agent. The reasoning, when it has been set down, involves the theory that urine has purifying properties, that it has been used in this way in many cultures for many years, and that you should not have asked about the details because now you know them. This is a practice that persists in folk medicine for longer than you'd think. The wealthy use things the poor can't afford. Coral powder, which is exactly what it sounds like. Powdered coral, fine and abrasive and expensive, and pearl ash, which is calcined pearl, almost white, extremely fine, and the price of it reflects both the material and the labour. Mix these into a paste with a little oil of cloves for the scent and the numbing quality, and you have something that a lady's maid applies to her mistress's teeth each morning with a silver-tipped brush. Not a toothbrush in the modern sense, more of a small instrument with stiff bristles made from horsehair, or, if you're very wealthy, from pig bristle. The toothbrush is coming. It exists already in China, has existed there for centuries. By 1690, the first descriptions of toothbrushes in English, by that word, a brush specifically for teeth, will appear in print. But right now, in 1685, most people are still using the cloth. There are also tooth powders sold commercially, which is a growing market. You've seen them in the apothecaries and in the shops of certain traders who've identified a business opportunity in the gap between what people's mouths are doing and what people wish their mouths were doing. Some of these powders are reasonable. Chalk, orris root, salt. The same components that Mr. Birch uses in his practice. Some of them are questionable. Preparations involving brick dust, which is genuinely abrasive to the point of damaging the enamel, or preparations involving sulfuric acid in such diluted form that the seller insists it's harmless, and the seller is wrong. There are also the operators for the teeth, not established barber-surgeons like Mr. Birch, but travelling practitioners who set up at fairs and markets and offer their services with the combination of theatrical bravado and cheerful disregard for standards that characterises most fair-based medicine in this century. They sell tooth powders. They pull teeth, in public, for the entertainment value as much as the medical value. They sell elixirs and compounds that promise to preserve the teeth indefinitely. Most of these compounds do not preserve the teeth indefinitely, but they sell. They always sell. Because the alternative, the thing that would actually preserve teeth indefinitely, which is reducing sugar consumption, is not a thing that anyone wants to sell or buy or hear or seriously consider in a city that has decided it loves sweetness and intends to keep loving it regardless of what that sweetness does to the place where it enters the body first. Thursday afternoon, and you're going to Bartholomew Fair. This was not planned. What was planned was the end of the day, the shop closed, Mr. Birch's chair, your tooth, the pelican. What happened was that a regular customer came in at 4, a cloth merchant from Aldersgate Street who's been coming to Mr. Birch for 12 years, and this customer mentioned, in the conversation that happens between the first lather and the final rinse, that there's a famous operator for the teeth working at Bartholomew Fair this week. A man who's come from France, apparently, or claims to have come from France, which in 1685 carries a specific kind of authority in matters of medicine and refinement that is probably not entirely deserved, but is culturally very powerful. Goes by the name of Monsieur Dupré, the cloth merchant said, watching Mr. Birch work in the mirror. Set up in the fair with his own trumpet player to drown out the screaming. Draws a crowd every time. I'm told he's pulled 40 teeth in a day before. 40 teeth, Mr. Birch said. That's what they say. And he sells a tooth powder, French tooth powder, for 6pence a packet. The man's making a fortune. After the cloth merchant left, Mr. Birch stood in the middle of the shop for a moment with his arms folded, looking at nothing in particular. Go, he said. Sir, to the fair. Go and watch this Monsieur Dupré. He said the name with a very specific inflection. Not mockery, exactly, but close. Come back by 6, then we'll do your tooth. You went. Bartholomew Fair occupies the space around Smithfield, the great open area to the northwest of the city, the old meat market, the broad flat ground that has been the site of fairs since the 12th century. In August and September, the fair takes over. Every September, though the licence has been gradually restricted from the original fortnight of the medieval charter to something closer to 3 days now, Smithfield transforms. It is September, and the fair is in its last days. You smell it before you arrive. Not just the usual London smells, though those are present. The city follows you everywhere, in its smoke and its sewage and its animal residue. What you smell that's specific to the fair is roasting meat, the cook shops and the stalls turning meat over open fires, beer and worse beer, the canvas taverns that appear like mushrooms when the fair comes, hot sugar from the confectioner's stalls, the irony's not lost on you, animal dung from the horses and the cattle that pass through the market adjacent, and, underneath it all, something that might be called the smell of crowds, which is the smell of too many people in a small space who've been there since morning and will be there until night. You can hear the fair before you see it too. Drums, multiple drums, fiddles, a trumpet somewhere, the perpetual roar of several thousand people talking and laughing and calling and arguing simultaneously. The calls of the booth operators competing with each other across the press of bodies. You push through the entrance crowd and into the fair itself. Smithfield in the middle of a fair is like stepping into another version of London, one where the normal rules have been suspended and replaced by different rules. Rules that emphasize entertainment and noise and the relentless encouragement to spend money on things that are probably not worth what they cost. Booths line the paths. Cloth merchants showing their wares to women who run their fingers over the fabric with the practised attention of buyers. Food sellers with their boards of pies and pasties and the sticky sweet things that the confectioners make, sugar-crusted, arrayed on boards that glitter in the afternoon light. A puppeteer's booth with a canvas front and the muffled sounds of wooden figures performing what sounds like a domestic dispute in miniature. A fortune-teller in a canvas tent that isn't quite big enough. the flaps slightly open, and inside a woman with a deck of cards and the particular expression of someone who has heard approximately every question a human being has about their future. You navigate the press of bodies, moving toward the sound of the trumpet. Because there is a trumpet, not the random musical trumpet of entertainers. This is a specific, purposeful trumpet, played in short bursts at irregular intervals, with the clear function of getting people's attention and keeping it. You find Dupré at the north end of the fair, in a space he's commandeered between two large canvas booths, where his own setup has created a kind of theatre. He has a chair, like Mr. Birch's chair, but less sturdy, mounted on a wooden platform about 2 feet off the ground so that everyone can see what's happening. He has a table beside him with his instruments laid out, more instruments than Mr. Birch would consider necessary, arranged with a kind of theatrical abundance that says I have many tools and I use all of them. He has an assistant, a young man about your age, who stands to one side and whose function appears to be part practical and part theatrical, and he has the trumpet player, a stout man who plays in short commanding blasts when Dupré signals him with a raised hand. Dupré himself is maybe 50, stout with a dark wig and a coat that is either genuinely French or has been purchased with the intention of appearing French, which amounts to the same thing for his purposes. He speaks in a voice calibrated to carry across a fair, large, rounded, confident in the way of someone who has been performing for 20 years and knows exactly how far his voice reaches and exactly how to fill the space he's standing in. The tooth, he's saying, to the gathered crowd of perhaps 40 people, is a creature of remarkable complexity. It has a root, it has a surface, it has an interior life. He pauses. This is a theatrical pause, the pause of someone who knows exactly when to let silence do the work. And like all things of complexity, it is subject to corruption, to decay, to the quiet disaster that begins with a small ache in the jaw. Another pause, and ends with a man sitting in my chair, begging me to take the thing out. Scattered laughter from the crowd. I have pulled, Dupré says, with the tone of someone announcing a personal achievement, in the last 12 years, upward of 4,000 teeth. The teeth of clergymen and criminals, the teeth of merchants and beggars, the teeth of one duke, whose name I will not say, and approximately 900 ordinary Englishmen who are no different from you. He looks at the crowd. Who is first? The first is a young man who'd clearly been worked up to this by his companions, who stand around him in a loose semicircle of varying degrees of encouragement and amusement. He mounts the platform with the energy of someone who has decided to treat this as a performance of bravery rather than a medical procedure, which is a reasonable approach. Dupré examines the tooth with a probe and a speed that suggests he's done this enough times that the examination serves primarily to confirm what the patient's pain has already told him. Which one? The young man asks. Dupré points. Is it? Dupré raises his hand. The trumpet player raises his instrument. The assistant positions himself beside the patient. The crowd, which has been murmuring, goes quiet in the way that crowds go quiet before something happens. Dupré moves. The trumpet blares. Whatever sound the young man makes is, as promised, entirely drowned out by the trumpet. All you can see is the movement of Dupré's hands, very fast, the white of the young man's knuckles on the armrests, the brief terrible moment when the instrument engages and the physics of the extraction happen, and then there is the tooth, held up in Dupré's fingers for the crowd to see. The trumpet stops. The young man is breathing hard, pressing the linen Dupre's assistant has given him against his jaw, but he's grinning. The grin of someone who has done a thing that was frightening and has come out the other side. The crowd cheers. Dupre holds the tooth up higher, displays it. "Clean root," he announces. "That is a good extraction. No fragment, no complication. This young man will eat his supper tonight." He looks at the patient, carefully on the other side. More laughter. The assistant collects the fee, 2p, considerably less than Mr. Birch's shilling, and the young man descends from the platform to his friends, who clap him on the back with the respect owed to a man who has done something genuinely unpleasant and survived it publicly. You watch for 6 more extractions. You watch because it is your job, in some sense. Mr. Birch sent you here to observe a competitor, and the observation is genuinely educational. Dupre's technique is not identical to Mr. Birch's. He uses the pelican less. He uses forceps more. His speed is greater, not recklessness exactly, but a practiced velocity that minimizes the duration of the worst part at the cost of some of the careful positioning Mr. Birch insists on. The results are mixed. 4 of the 6 extractions are clean and fast. 1 leaves a fragment of root, which Dupre addresses with an elevator instrument and more trumpet. A longer blast this time, while the patient grips the armrests with whitened hands, and the crowd watches with the particular fascination of people watching something difficult happen to someone else. 1 extraction goes badly wrong. The tooth cracks on the attempt, the root remaining in the socket, and Dupre spends several minutes and several trumpet blasts retrieving it in pieces, while the patient, a middle-aged woman, makes sounds that the trumpet cannot entirely contain. She is ultimately all right. The root comes out. The bleeding is addressed. She descends from the platform looking pale and slightly stunned, but the tooth is out, and the pain that drove her here is gone. But all right is relative, and the interval between the start of the extraction and the conclusion is long enough that the crowd, which cheered the first few extractions, is by this one quieter. Not silent. This is a fair, and fairs are not silent, but quieter in a way that suggests the entertainment value of watching dental surgery has begun to bump up against the reality of dental surgery, which is that it is dental surgery and not fundamentally entertainment. Dupre seems aware of this. He transitions smoothly into the sale of his tooth powder. "The French dental elixir," he announces, producing from a box on his table a series of small folded packets of the kind you've seen at Parsons and at a dozen other apothecaries. The most advanced tooth preparation available in the world today, used at the court of Louis himself, used by every person of quality in Paris. The compound that keeps the teeth clean, the gums firm, the breath sweet, and the tooth sound against the effects of sugar and wine and all the pleasures of the table. He holds up a packet, 6p a packet, 3 packets for a shilling. The crowd, which has been watching the extractions and has perhaps been thinking about their own mouths in a way that fairgoers usually do not, moves toward the packets with a willingness that is perfectly rational and perfectly human. You buy a packet. You buy it partly out of professional curiosity to bring back to Mr. Birch, and partly out of the specific vulnerability of standing near a stall that sells something. For tooth pain, when you have a tooth that has been hurting for 3 days, you open it on your way out of the fair and touch a little to your tongue. Chalk, salt, something sweet underneath. Possibly anise, possibly something else. Nothing that doesn't exist in Mr. Birch's compounds. Nothing that would justify sixpence. The packaging is very nice. You're back at the shop before 6. Mr. Birch is with a final patient. A shave. Quick. Mechanical. The end-of-day shave for a man who needs to be presentable at something tonight. By the time you hang your coat, the patient has paid and gone. The shop is quiet. Mr. Birch is cleaning up, rolling the used linen into the bin for washing, replacing the razor to its case. The packet, you say, setting Dupre's tooth powder on the counter. Mr. Birch picks it up, opens it, touches the powder, rubs it between his fingers. Chalk, he says. Salt. A pause. Anise. That's what I thought. Sixpence. Sixpence. Mr. Birch sets the packet down. And his technique? You describe what you saw. The speed, the forceps preference, the mixed results, the failed extraction, and its resolution. The trumpet. The trumpet, Mr. Birch says, to drown out the sound. I know what the trumpet is for. He's quiet for a moment. Does it help? The patients? I think, yes. I think knowing that the sound is going to be covered helps them. Even if they still make the sound, the other people can't hear it. Dignity, Mr. Birch says. He's selling dignity along with the tooth drawing. He picks up the pelican, not preparing it, just holding it, looking at it. There is something to be said for that, he says. He puts it down. Sit in the chair. You sit in the chair. You have helped dozens of people into this chair. You have stood beside them, your hand on their shoulder, saying nothing and conveying by your presence whatever small comfort presence conveys. You have watched their hands go white on the armrests. You have watched their eyes find the ceiling. The ceiling from the chair is not particularly interesting. It has a water stain in one corner that you have never noticed from the other side of the shop. A crack running from the window toward the centre. You find a point to look at. You grip the arm rests. Mr. Birch's hands move to your jaw. The examination has already been done. He knows what he's doing. He positions the pelican with the economy of someone who's done this 10,000 times. You don't watch his hands. You keep your eyes on the ceiling. The pressure begins. A deep pressure, then deeper, then the specific sensation of the instrument engaging the tooth, the fulcrum, the physics of the extraction building toward their conclusion. The sound. You knew it was coming. You've heard it hundreds of times. And still, when it is your own tooth, when the sound is inside your own jaw, translated through bone and the architecture of your own skull directly into your inner ear, it is entirely different. It is over in 4 seconds. Your hands are shaking. This is new information about yourself. Your hands shake after. The linen cloth. You press it to your mouth. The blood tastes like copper. Your tooth is in the brass bowl. Breathe, Mr. Birch says. You breathe. The pain in your jaw, the 3 days of throbbing, the 2 in the morning sitting up straight, the low constant fire, is gone. Not reduced, not dulled. Gone. There is instead the raw, clean pain of an extraction. The gum, the socket, the aftermath. But this pain is different. This pain is a wound healing, not a tooth dying. This pain is, in its way, a relief. Clean root, Mr. Birch says. No fragment. He's looking at the tooth in the bowl with the same professional assessment he applies to everything. You waited longer than you should have. Yes, sir. Next time. I know. He wraps the tooth in a scrap of paper. This is something he does for all extractions. He doesn't explain why. Patients sometimes want to take the tooth with them as a kind of evidence. I survived this. Here is the proof. Others leave them. He wraps them anyway. You take yours. It's your tooth. It seems appropriate. He gives you the usual instructions. He gives you the same instructions you've heard him give 30 times, and now you understand them differently. Not as a sequence of things to do and not do, but as a map of the next few days, when the bleeding will stop, when the worst of the soreness will ease, when you'll be able to eat normally. Oil of cloves, he says, handing you a small piece of linen soaked in the oil. If it gets bad tonight, will it? He looks at you with the grey eyes. It might, he says. Your first night after is usually the worst. Supper that evening is bread and a soft cheese, because your jaw will not manage much else, and a mug of small beer, which you drink on the left side. Mr. Birch's wife, Mrs. Birch, a woman of 50 who runs the household, and the accounts with an authority that Mr. Birch has clearly long since stopped feeling any need to challenge, serves supper and then returns to her room to read, as she does every evening. She has opinions about the book. You occasionally hear her commenting on it to the air, or possibly to the book itself. Tonight she takes the candle and leaves you and Mr. Birch at the table, eating in the comfortable silence of people who know each other well enough that silence is not awkward. "Do pray," Mr. Birch says eventually. "Yes, sir." "What did you think?" "Not the technique. What did you think?" "You think about the woman on the platform, the trumpet blaring, the crowd watching, the young man grinning after, the relief on his face. He makes it possible, you say after a moment, for people who wouldn't otherwise go to a surgeon, who can't afford a shilling, who need to feel like it's..." You search for the word manageable, like something they can do and survive. "And then they go home without a tooth and with a packet of sixpence chalk powder." "Yes, but they don't have the tooth anymore." Mr. Birch considers this. "The tooth was going to kill them eventually," he says, "if they let it go long enough. And they weren't going to pay a shilling." "No." He breaks off a piece of bread. "No, they weren't." He chews carefully. He's missing several back teeth, and chewing is a mechanical question for him. The path the food takes a matter of conscious management. "The people who need their teeth out most," he says, "are often the people least likely to come here." He gestures at the shop, which is closed now, dark and quiet outside this back room's candlelight. The sixpence makes it possible. The trumpet makes it tolerable. He pauses. "I'm not sure the French powder is worth sixpence, but I'll grant him the rest. You eat your bread." "Why did you send me to watch him?" you ask. Mr. Birch looks at you. "Because you're going to be a surgeon," he says. "Not grandly, not as a prophecy, just as a statement of what is going to happen. And surgeons should know all the ways their work gets done, not just the way they do it." This is, you realise, the longest and most specifically encouraging thing Mr. Birch has ever said to you. You don't know what to say. "Eat your bread," he says. "Your jaw will be sore tomorrow. We're busy in the morning." That night, lying in the attic, you cannot sleep. Not because of the jaw. The jaw is doing what Mr. Birch said it would do, aching steadily, the socket tender, but bearable. You've pressed the oil of cloves cloth against it once. It helped. No, you can't sleep because you're thinking about sugar. This is not a poetic observation. You're thinking about sugar in a practical, specific way. About the sugar house on Thames Street and the workers in their leather aprons, and the boy on the step with his scrap of sugar candy. About the woman in the silk dress this morning, her front teeth dark, her careful composure, the way she said they're just black as if she was reporting damage to a piece of furniture. About Dupré with his trumpet and his packets of sixpence chalk, and the 40 people who bought it and went home with their mouths still full of sugar about the fact that the city is getting sweeter every year, that the ships come up the Thames loaded with the product of a system that no one at this end of the trade is looking at too directly, and that every packet of sugar that comes off those ships ends up eventually in someone's mouth and leaves something there on its way through, and nobody, not Dupre with his French elixir, not Mr. Birch with his fine chalk compound, not Parson with his coral powder and pearl ash, is telling people to stop eating it, because that is not a thing people do. That is not a thing anyone in 1685 London is equipped to do. The sweetness has arrived, and the sweetness will stay, and the trade that brings it will grow, because the trade is making a great deal of money, and money is the language the city understands. The teeth will continue to decay, the tooth drawers will continue to be busy, and tomorrow morning you will be back in the shop, and someone will come in with a jaw that's been hurting for 3 days, and Mr. Birch will look at it and say it wants to come out, and they will grip the armrests and find their spot on the ceiling, the same as today, the same as yesterday, the same as all the days stretching ahead of you in this trade that Mr. Birch says will make you a surgeon. Peter is snoring. Outside, Cheapside is not quite quiet. The city never quite stops, but quieter. The carts have stopped. The vendors are gone. The usual night sounds. A watchman somewhere in the next street calling the hour. The distant argument from a tavern 2 streets over. The sound of the river, which you can't hear from here, but which you know is there, always there, carrying its loads in both directions. You press the oil of cloves cloth to your jaw once more. The throb eases. You close your eyes. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday, with a sky the colour of pewter and the smell of the first proper autumn rain in the air, Mr. Birch tells you to take the afternoon. Be back by 5, he says. I have a patient at 5. Until then, he makes a gesture that means don't waste it, but it's yours. You walk south, the monument. You've passed it a dozen times. It stands at the northern end of London Bridge, or rather, it stands near that end of London Bridge, in the street called Monument Street, which was renamed for it because when a column that tall arrives in your neighbourhood, you update the map. It was built to commemorate the Great Fire, the fire of 1666 that burned half of London in 3 days, and the summer of 1666, and changed the city permanently. Designed by Christopher Wren and Robert Hooke. 311 feet tall, which is exactly the distance from its base to the place where the fire started on Pudding Lane. This is deliberate. This is the kind of mathematical intention that people in 1685 find significant, and they're not wrong. The column is Portland stone, white against the grey sky, fluted, massive. At the top, a gold ball that catches any available light and returns it. Gold against grey, visible from enormous distances. You've looked at it from the street many times. Today, you're going to climb it. The entrance is a door at the base, managed by a man who takes your tuppence with the indifference of a man who has taken many tuppences and will take many more. The stairs are inside the column, a spiral staircase of 311 steps. Of course it's 311 steps. Everything about this building is exactly 311 of something, winding up through the hollow interior of the shaft. The stairs are stone, cold under your hand where you brace against the inner wall. The spiral is tight enough that you can't see more than a quarter turn ahead. You go up. Your legs feel it by step 70. By 150, your thighs are working. By 200, you're breathing differently. The September air thin inside the column, the sound of the city below fading with each turn of the spiral. The gap in your jaw aches slightly with the effort. You press your tongue to it. Feel the healing edge of the gum, softer than the surrounding teeth, sensitive in a way that will pass in another week. By step 250, you're not thinking about your jaw. By step 311, you're at the top. The viewing gallery is narrow, protected by a railing, and open on all sides to the September afternoon. The wind hits you first. Actual wind, not the channeled version of wind that moves through London streets below, but real, open-air wind. The wind of being above the roof line. The wind of being the highest you've been in your 17 years. Then the view. London. You've seen London from the water, the perspective from a river ferry, looking up at the wharves and the buildings rising behind them. You've seen it from Cheapside, which is London at its most intense and commercial. You've seen it from the edge of Smithfield, looking down toward the city's northern approaches. You've never seen it from above. The city spreads in every direction. To the north, the jumbled rooftops of 1,000 buildings, old and new, cramped together in the organic, unplanned way that cities grow when no one is in charge of the growth, but everyone is making their own small decisions about where to put the next wall. Smoke rising from 100 chimneys, the spires of the new churches Wren is building. He's rebuilding 50 of the churches the fire took, most of them still under construction, the scaffolding visible from up here as a kind of skeleton growing around the city's ecclesiastical ambitions. St. Paul's Cathedral, not yet complete, its dome still absent. The dome that will define London's skyline for the next 3 centuries is still in the future, still being designed, the great shell of the new cathedral rising from the ruins of the old. To the south, the river, the Thames, wide and silver-grey and permanent, the one thing in London that doesn't change with time or fire or plague or the ambitions of monarchs. The bridge, London Bridge, the only bridge, packed with its buildings and its crowds and its impossible medieval existence, crossing from north to south, connecting the city proper to Southwark and all the complicated things that Southwark contains. To the east, the docks, the forest of masts that you can see from here as a literal forest, hundreds of ships moored and anchored in the pool of London, their yards stripped of sail, their hulls riding high or low depending on what they're carrying or have delivered, the wharves and warehouses stretching along both banks, and somewhere in those ships, somewhere among all those cargoes from all those places, the sugar, coming up from the West Indies, from Jamaica and Barbados and the smaller islands whose names appear in pamphlets and in the ledgers of merchants and in the conversations of men at the Royal Exchange. Arriving in London in the form of raw cane, hogsheads of Muscovado sugar, which goes to the refineries on Thames Street and emerges as the white loaves in their blue paper that sit in every shop, the trade that is sweetening the city, the trade that is, very quietly, destroying the teeth of the city, the trade that is making certain men very wealthy and certain other men, and women, and children on the other end of it, something that no one at this end wants to look at too directly. You can see all of it from up here, or the suggestion of all of it, the ships and the warehouses and the refineries and the shops and the streets where people walk with their jaws slightly tilted, pressing their handkerchiefs to their cheeks, a city of 500,000 people in the middle of a sweet disaster. The wind is cold now, the September cold getting into your coat, past the wool into your skin. You stay up there for a long time. Walking back to Cheapside through the narrow streets that divide the city east to west in their complicated medieval way, you stop at a confectioner's stall. The stall is between a glover's shop and a bookseller's stall. The man running it is small and cheerful with red cheeks, and he's selling sugar plums, small spherical confections made of sugar and some kind of filling, hard-coated, very sweet. A penny for 4. You give him a penny. You hold the 4 sugar plums in your hand. You look at them. Small, light, perfectly round. The sort of thing a child would find magical and an adult finds pleasant, and no one, literally no one in 1685 standing at a confectioner's stall on a street in London would think of as a small instrument of destruction. You eat one, it's very sweet. The sweetness spreads across your tongue, and the roof of your mouth and the inside of your cheeks fills the entire oral cavity with the particular intense pleasure of concentrated sugar. It dissolves slowly, the coating cracks, then softens, then the filling, which is something between dried fruit and more sugar. You stand there and think about the woman in the silk dress, the boy on the step at the sugar house, the 40 people at Bartholomew Fair who bought packets of 6-pence chalk powder, Mr. Birch's grey eyes and his steady hands and his 7 or 8 missing teeth. You eat the second one. It's just as sweet as the first. You eat the third. You wrap the fourth carefully in the cloth from your pocket and put it away. You start walking. The tooth powder. Let's stay here for a moment, because this is where the history gets strange in the way that history sometimes gets strange. The thing everyone was looking for already existed. Tooth cleaning, real tooth cleaning in the modern sense of the habit practiced twice daily with a specific instrument, was not absent from the world in 1685. In China, the brush had existed for centuries. A handle with boar bristles set into one end, a small instrument designed specifically for this purpose, used daily. The knowledge was coming to Europe. Arab traders and missionaries and travellers had seen it. Descriptions existed. But the toothbrush, that specific word, that specific mass-produced instrument, would not appear in English daily life until about 5 years after this particular Tuesday afternoon in September 1685. 5 years. 5 years away from the thing that would gradually over the next century change the baseline of what clean teeth meant. In the meantime, the cloth, the chalk, the salt, the charcoal, the coral powder, the pearl ash, the urine of children, you've chosen not to pursue this option, the 6-pence French powder from a man with a trumpet, and the pelican in the brass bowl at the end. The history of dental hygiene is the history of people trying to solve a problem that kept getting worse, faster than the solutions could catch up. The problem accelerated when sugar arrived. The solutions arrived eventually, but slowly and never quite as fast as the problem required. And in the space between the arrival of sugar and the arrival of real solutions, there were people like Thomas Birch on Cheapside, with his steady hands and his fine-milled chalk and his grey eyes that saw everything and said carefully, "I'll tell you what I see. What you do with it is your affair." And people like Dupré with his trumpet, making the unbearable briefly endurable for 2 pence and a crowd. And people like you, 17, learning, with a fresh extraction socket healing in your jaw and a sugar plum wrapped in cloth in your pocket. October arrives, the first cold that is genuinely cold. Not September cold, but October cold. The kind that comes off the river in the early morning and finds every gap in your clothes. You add a second layer to your morning and a third to your night time, and you break the ice in the basin twice a week now, your knuckle coming down on the frozen surface with a crack that Peter, still snoring beside you, does not stir at. The new tooth cloth ritual. After watching Dupre and after your conversation with Parson, and after thinking, standing at the top of the monument, about what it means to see a problem from above, you've started a new practice. Every morning, before you go downstairs, you wet the tooth cloth with the water from the basin, dip it in a small amount of the fine chalk compound that Mr. Birch allows you to take a small portion of, and clean your teeth. All of them, systematically, not quickly, the way you used to pass the cloth across them in a gesture toward cleanliness, but carefully, working from back to front on both sides, the cloth reaching as far back as it will go. It takes about 3 minutes. This is not a dramatic act. It is not a revelation in the catalogue of things that will eventually prevent the particular disaster that is unfolding in this city's mouths. A tooth cloth and chalk compound in 1685 is modest, limited. The enamel that is already compromised stays compromised. The places where decay has already begun their work do not reverse, but the film comes off. The accumulated matter between the teeth, the residue of every meal, the coating that bacteria, though you don't know the word, don't have the concept yet, use as their medium comes off. The surface is clean, the gums respond, less tender than before. The bleeding that used to happen sometimes when you press the cloth too firmly eases over the weeks. This is enough to do something. It's not enough to undo what sugar does, taken in the quantities this city takes it. But it's enough to do something. Mr. Birch notices one morning, after you've been doing this for 3 weeks. He doesn't comment on it. He just watches you come downstairs and says once, "You've been cleaning your teeth." "Yes, sir, every morning." He nods once. This is high praise from Mr. Birch. The weeks pass, November comes, with its particular London character. Fog in the morning, the coal smoke thickening, the days so short that you open the shop in near darkness and close it again before full dark arrives. The candles burn all day. The patients continue to arrive. You begin to understand the patterns. There are categories of rotten tooth. The ones that have been neglected from ignorance. The ones from fear. The ones from poverty. The ones from sheer bad luck. The tooth that is structurally weak regardless of what the person ate. There are patients who come in, understand what needs to be done, and do it with the quiet resolution of people who deal with difficult things by dealing with them. There are patients who need 3 visits before they'll agree to the extraction, each visit involving a fresh round of negotiation, a new temporary measure, another week of pain. There are patients who never come back. You see them sometimes in the street, their jaws held slightly wrong, and you know they're still enduring it, have decided that the endurance is preferable to the chair. You understand the choice. Even having been in the chair yourself, especially having been in the chair yourself, you understand the choice. Mr. Birch begins to trust you with more, not the extractions. Those remain his entirely and will for years. But the examination, the preliminary assessment. A patient comes in and Mr. Birch says to you, "Tell me what you see," and you look and you describe what you see, and Mr. Birch either confirms your assessment or explains where you've misread the situation and why. This is the work of becoming a surgeon. Not the dramatic moments, not the extractions, or the bleedings, or the wound dressings, the looking, the learning to see what is actually there rather than what you expect to see. the slow accumulation of pattern and exception, and the calibration of your own judgment against reality. You're wrong sometimes, more often than feels comfortable, but less often than at the start. Late November, on a grey afternoon when the shop is quiet between patients and Mr. Birch has stepped out to the apothecary, a boy appears at the door. He's maybe 12, in clothes that have seen better days, with a face in which you can read several things simultaneously: pain, pride, the particular expression of someone who has been sent to do something by a parent and is determined to do it without showing how frightened they are. "My mother," he says, "her tooth, she sent me to ask." "Tell me," you say. He tells you. The same story in different specifics. 3 days, maybe 4, bad at night, the right side. She can't eat. "Is she working?" you ask. He nods. "She's a laundress," he says. "She can't stop working." She has 4 children. She works from before dawn until dark 6 days a week, and on the 7th day she does the laundry that the laundry takes too long to do during the week. "The fee is £1, you say. His face does something complicated. "She can pay 6pence, he says. "She saved 6pence. She asked me to ask if—" He stops. You think about Dupré and his 2pence and his trumpet and the 40 people who bought the 6pence powder. You think about Mr. Birch's grey eyes. You think about the woman with the laundry and 4 children and a tooth that has been hurting for 4 days. "Tell her to come tomorrow morning," you say, "first thing, before the shop opens officially." He looks at you. "The shilling," you begin, and then you stop because you don't have the authority to adjust Mr. Birch's fee, and you are about to offer something that is not yours to offer, and you know it. But you also know what Mr. Birch will say, because you have been watching him for nearly a year, because you know what he does, quietly and without announcement, when someone comes to the door at closing time and clearly cannot pay, but clearly cannot endure the pain either. He has never said anything to you about it. He has simply done it occasionally, and there is no record of it in the account book, and you have understood that this is not something that is discussed. "Come tomorrow morning," you say. "First thing." The boy nods. He turns to leave, and there's something in his walk, a relief, a lightening of the shoulders, that says the message he was afraid to deliver has been delivered, and the answer was not the worst possible answer. He goes. You stand in the shop alone for a moment. Your jaw is healed now, completely healed, the socket closed over, the surrounding teeth having shifted slightly to fill the gap in the way that teeth do, which is not entirely comfortable but is physiologically correct. You have a space where a molar used to be, which you feel most clearly when you eat things that require sustained chewing on that side. You think this is going to be a very good reminder for the rest of your life of certain things. The woman comes the next morning. She's maybe 35, which in the hard life of a London laundress looks 45. Her hands are the hands of someone who has spent years in hot water and cold air alternately, reddened, roughened, the skin cracked at the knuckles. She holds herself very straight, the way people hold themselves straight when they're in pain and won't show it. Mr. Birch examines the tooth, confirms your assessment. You gave him the boy's description the previous evening after you returned from the apothecary, and he'd said simply, "I'll see her," and said nothing else. The extraction is quick. He uses the forceps, not the pelican. The forceps for this particular position, this particular root configuration, which he explains to you afterward in 2 brief sentences that contain the accumulated experience of 30 years. She pays 6pence. Mr. Birch takes it without any expression, puts it in the box. After she leaves, he goes directly to the razor. Nothing is said. You understand that nothing will be said. You pick up the toothcloth and the chalk compound. You begin to prepare the instruments for the day, December, and the first frost fair. The river doesn't freeze every year, only in the coldest winters, when the temperature drops and stays dropped for long enough that the Thames, which is not a small river, can be overcome by cold. But 1685 to 1686 will prove to be a cold winter, and in late December, word begins to travel through the city with the speed that interesting news always travels. The river is beginning to freeze. You see it on your way to the conduit one morning. The edges of the Thames, where the current is slowest, have acquired a grey-white rim. Thin, not load-bearing, not yet, but it started. By the first week of January, the river is frozen enough that the brave and possibly foolish have begun to walk on it. By the second week, it's solid enough that the vendors have arrived, setting up stalls on the ice the way they set up at the fair at Smithfield in September, with the same cheerful disregard for the fact that they are standing on a river. There are fires on the ice, actual fires, contained in iron baskets, and around the fires people are roasting an ox. There is an ox being roasted on the frozen Thames, which is a sentence that is true and is not a metaphor, and selling the meat and charging people a coin to watch it and another coin to eat it. There are sledges being pulled, puppet shows, a printer who's set up his press on the ice and is printing souvenir pamphlets titled On the Frozen Thames for people who want documentation that this is happening and they were there. Mr. Birch gives you Sunday. You spend it on the ice. You walk out from the north bank on a pathway of boards that people have put down to help the transition from solid ground to frozen river, and then you're on the ice. The ice is thick enough that it doesn't flex under your weight, doesn't crack. It's solid, grey-white, and you can see through it in places to the dark water beneath. Moving slowly even under the ice, the river insisting on its nature even when the surface has been taken from it. The city looks different from the middle of the river. You've been on the water before. The ferry to Southwark, the journey to the apothecary on Thames Street, on the days when the errand takes you near the wharves. But those views are from the water's surface, looking up at the buildings rising behind the quays. The ice is different. You're standing on the river, standing inside a space that is usually water, in the middle of something that is usually passage, on a surface that shouldn't exist and will be gone in a month. The city on both banks is visible as a complete panorama. North, the buildings of the city proper, the church spires, the bridge, the wharves. South, Southwark, lower, less grand, the borough market's rooftops. And to the east, visible in the winter clarity, the ships moored in the Pool of London, their hulls now encased in ice to the waterline, their masts and yards making a forest against the grey sky. You can see from here all of it, the sugar houses with their sweet steam even in winter, the wharves where the goods come off the ships, the streets where the shops are, and inside them the sugar in its blue paper, the compounders at the apothecary, the barber-surgeons with their polished brass basins and their pelicans, the people, all the people. Walking with their jaws held slightly wrong, doing the quiet arithmetic of pain that you've come to recognise in a way you couldn't before. The frost fair is going on around you. The roasting ox, the sledges, the printer, the vendors selling hot drinks that are keeping their customers warm and their teeth, if the drinks are sweet enough, quietly busy with their work of dissolution. You stand on the frozen river and look at the city. The boy from Bristol, who is becoming something else. That's what you think standing on the ice in January 1686, cold enough that your breath makes a cloud, and the tip of your nose has stopped feeling anything. The boy who arrived in London with a letter and a bundle of clothes, who flinched at the noise and got lost the first week on streets that would become so familiar he could walk them in complete darkness, who heard his first extraction and felt it in his own jaw, who watched a fairground operator with a trumpet and understood from watching something about dignity and access, and who gets to have their pain addressed and for how much, who is learning, slowly and imperfectly, and with considerable wrong turns, to see what is actually there. The gap in your jaw, the molar that came out in October, is healed over. You run your tongue over the spot sometimes without meaning to, a kind of involuntary inventory. Your other teeth, intact, so far. The chalk compound every morning, the careful attention to what you eat and how you eat it, the knowledge, professional now, not just academic, of what sugar does when it sits in contact with the tooth for long enough. You still eat sugar plums. You're not going to stop eating sugar plums, but you eat them differently now. You know what they are at the cellular level that 1685 doesn't have the vocabulary for, but that you can observe in the results. You know what comes after. The city around you doesn't know, not yet. The knowledge is coming, is being assembled in medical pamphlets and physicians' accounts and the quiet observation of men like Mr. Birch. But it hasn't reached the confectioner's stall or the sugar house or the merchant's household, where sweet preserves are set out at every meal. It will take another 100 years, and then another 100, and the sweetness and the decay will continue in each other's company for a very long time. The shop opens at 7. The first customer of the New Year's first working week is an apprentice from a silk merchant's 2 streets over, a boy about your age who arrives with his hand over his jaw and the sheepish look of someone who's been putting this off. You show him to the chair. Mr. Birch examines, delivers his assessment, the usual sequence. The boy grips the armrests. You rest your hand on his shoulder, light, present. He finds his spot on the ceiling. Mr. Birch moves, the sound. You don't flinch anymore. You can feel it slightly in the healed socket in your own jaw. A ghost of it. The body remembering what the body has been through. But you don't flinch. The boy breathes, presses the cloth to his mouth, stares at the ceiling for a moment longer than he needs to. Done, Mr. Birch says. You repeat it. You're done. The boy's eyes come down from the ceiling. He nods. He pays his shilling. He goes. The days are getting longer. It's a small change, undetectable from one day to the next. But by February, the difference between the dawn and the previous month's dawn is real. The grey light coming through the attic window slightly earlier. The worst of the winter cold beginning to be negotiable rather than absolute. The river has thawed. The frost fair is gone. The ox roasting spot is under water. The ice that was the ice is now just water again, moving east toward the sea the way it has always moved. The ships are moving again, coming up the Thames with their cargoes. More sugar, more of it. More people at the door with their hands against their jaws. Here is a thing Mr. Birch says to you in February, on an afternoon when the shop is quiet and he's working on his accounts and you're sweeping the floor, and it's the kind of quiet that can sustain a conversation. He says, "You know what the worst part of this work is? You wait. Not the extractions," he says, "not the difficult cases, not the blood." He pauses, his pen moving in the ledger. The worst part is watching it coming. The decay? The whole thing. Patient comes in for a shave. 30 years old, reasonable teeth, for 30, in this city. Some sugar damage already, but not severe. Come back in 5 years. Come back in 10. He makes a mark in the ledger. And you know, when you examine them, what you'll see in 5 years, in 10, because you've seen it 100 times, in people who were 30 and are now 40 and 50. You know where it goes. He closes the ledger, and you can tell them, you can explain it. You can mix them a fine chalk compound and explain the importance of cleaning and tell them about sugar. Some of them will listen. He looks at you. Some of them won't. And the ones who won't, you'll see them again. In 5 years. In 10. And the thing you saw coming will have arrived. And you do the extraction. And you do the extraction. He opens the ledger again. And you do it well, because by that point it's what they need. But it's the distance between the thing you could see coming and the thing you couldn't prevent. He stops. He doesn't finish the sentence. You sweep the floor. Is that why you sent me to see Dupré? You ask after a moment. No, he says. I sent you to see Dupré because I wanted to know what he's doing. But what I want you to learn from it, he pauses considering, is that the work isn't always what the training tells you it is. The work is also the sixpence tooth powder that doesn't cure anything but gets someone through the door. The work is the trumpet that lets someone feel like it's bearable. The work is the shilling and sometimes the sixpence. He marks something in the ledger. The patient in the chair isn't a set of instruments. They're a person who is frightened and in pain and doing the best they can with what they understand. Your job is to know more than they do and to use that knowledge to help them, not to judge them for not knowing what they don't know. He closes the ledger for the second time. Now sweep behind the shelf. You always miss behind the shelf. You sweep behind the shelf. Spring comes, March, and the first days of warmth arriving in the afternoon, when the streets of Cheapside catch the sun and the vendors reappear with the spring goods. New lambs at Smithfield, the first green vegetables from the market gardens north of the city, the mud of winter drying and becoming the mud of spring, which is different mud, lighter, with optimism in it. The tooth drawing continues, the sugar continues, you continue. 1 year in this shop, coming up to it, and you can look back at the person who arrived with the letter and the bundle of clothes and feel the distance between that person and this one, which is not a long distance in years, but is very long in the particular currency of what you've seen and learned and understood. You can look at a mouth and read it the way you read a street, the history in it, the social story, the evidence of choices and circumstances and luck. You can tell a rich mouth from a poor one, not by the number of teeth, but by the patterns of decay, the type of damage, the story of what remedies have been tried and what the patient had access to. You can estimate someone's age in their teeth. You can estimate their diet. You can hear the trumpet of the fairground operator and understand what it's for and why it matters and why Mr. Birch, who has never used a trumpet, is not wrong not to use one, but is not more right than Dupré either. You can hold a hand on a shoulder and mean it. Late spring, a Tuesday, the kind of Tuesday where the morning is fine and the afternoon clouds over, and by evening there's a smell in the air that's either rain or the river, depending on which direction you're facing. Mr. Birch is closing up. The accounts, the ledger, the strongbox under the floorboards. You finish sweeping. Peter is already upstairs. Peter, your current attic roommate, who is 2 years into his apprenticeship and has recently stopped flinching at the extractions, which you track as a developmental milestone the way you might track a child learning to walk. Mr. Birch looks at you from across the shop. You'll sit the examination, he says. You look up. The company examination, he says. The barber's company, next autumn if you continue as you have been. This is not the qualification that will make you a surgeon. That's further and more complicated and involves years of work you haven't done yet. But it's the first step, the formal recognition, the thing that makes the apprentice a journeyman. Yes, sir, you say. He nods. He picks up the razor case and puts it in the cabinet. You're not a bad surgeon, he says. You're not yet a good one, but you're becoming one. There's a difference between the two. He locks the cabinet. Get some sleep. Early start tomorrow. The attic room. Peter is asleep already. His breathing is steady. Not quite snoring tonight. Just the deep, even breath of someone who has found a comfortable position and intends to stay in it. The window is a rectangle of dark blue. May, and the night's shorter, the warmest weather still ahead. Your jaw is fine. The extraction socket is completely healed. One full season behind you. The surrounding teeth have shifted and settled. You have 31 teeth instead of 32, which is an average number for someone your age in this city, which is in itself a fact worth sitting with for a moment. You reach into the coat pocket hanging on the nail by the door. The sugar plum you wrapped in October is gone, obviously. It was eaten weeks ago, and it was delicious, and you had approximately no regrets. But there's a fresh one in there. You bought it this afternoon, from the same stall, the same cheerful man with the red cheeks. You hold it in your fingers in the dark, small, round, heavy for its size. You know what's in it. Not just the ingredients, the sugar, the coating, the centre, but what it does on the micro scale that 1685 has no vocabulary for, but that the results speak to, unmistakably. You know the patience it comes in the door as. You know the brass bowl, and the pelican, and the socket afterward. You eat the sugar plum. It is very good. You put the wrapper back in your coat. You lie down. Outside, London goes on. The watchman on Cheapside calls the hour, 11 o'clock, and all is well. A ritual that connects this night to every night in this city's long history. The same words, the same voice modified by different mouths, back and back through the years. The sugar houses are dark. The ships are at anchor in the pool of London, their cargoes waiting for morning. The sugar in its blue paper sits on shelves in shops from one end of the city to the other, waiting for tomorrow's customers, waiting for the confectioners to open, waiting for the children with pennies and the merchants with sweet tooths and the ladies with their coral powder and their silver toothpick cases. In 5 years, the first toothbrushes in the English language will have a name. In 20 years, more physicians will be writing about sugar and decay and the connection between the sweet and the rotten. In 50 years, the sugar trade will be bigger and worse and more contested, and the teeth of the poor will be worse than they are now, and the rich will have better pastes and powders. In 200 years, someone will invent the cavity filling. In 250 years, fluoride will go in the water. In 300 years, you'll be able to buy 17 different kinds of toothbrush at any pharmacy in any city in the world. But tonight, it is 1686, and the thing that will change everything is 5 years away from being named. And the thing that is destroying everything is in the blue paper on every shelf. and there is a gap where a molar used to be, and chalk compound in a jar on the shelf downstairs, and a toothcloth hanging on the nail, and the particular satisfaction of having done what Mr. Birch said to do, and having had it be, as Mr. Birch's instructions generally are, correct. Your eyes are getting heavy. The city sounds fade, or you're fading. Sinking through the sound the way you sink through the shallow water near the river's edge, the sound becoming distant, becoming less the specifics of London and more the general hum of a place where people live, have always lived, will go on living. You think, without quite thinking it, of the view from the monument. The whole city spread out below, the ships and the sugar houses and the churches and the gaps in the skyline where Wren is still building. The river, silver, moving east. You think of the woman on the platform in the silk dress, her front teeth dark, her composure intact. You think of the boy with the sugar candy on the step, 9 years old, perfectly happy. You think of Mr. Birch's hands, steady. Absolutely steady. How many years does it take to make hands that steady? How much has passed through those hands? What has been in that brass bowl? How many people have found their spot on the ceiling in that chair? There is always more to learn. There is always more coming through the door. The body does not pause in its work of wearing down and wearing out and requiring the attention of people who know what they're looking at. The sugar does not pause in its work of sweetening everything it touches, which is the nature of sugar, which is not personal, which is simply what it is. The trade does not pause. These ships do not pause. The blue paper on the shelves does not sit still. But tonight, in this attic, above a barber-surgeon's shop on Cheapside, in the first year of the reign of a new king, in the middle of a city that is the centre of a world that doesn't know what it doesn't know. Tonight, you're warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. The tooth is healed. The chalk compound is ready for morning. There is work to do, and you know how to do it, and you're getting better at it every day. That is more than enough. Let the sound of the watchman fade. Let the river carry its sounds away east to the sea, to somewhere beyond the knowing. Let the city settle into the quiet it never quite reaches, but always tends toward. The breath between the sentences, the pause between the bells. Let your hands unclench, because you've been holding something all day. Every day you hold something. Instruments and measurements and worries and the small weight of other people's pain. And tonight you can put it down. Let the chalk and the salt and the orris root do their patient work. The surface clean, the beginning of a habit that will take 300 years to reach its full form, but the beginning of it, the seed of it, exists right now in a jar on a shelf in a small shop on Cheapside. And that is a thing worth knowing. The bells will ring again at 5. The basin will be cold. The stairs will creak on the 7th step. Mr. Birch will say you're late. You won't be late. And all of this will repeat, the way all good things repeat, the way all necessary things repeat, changed slightly each time, shaped a little more each time, becoming a little more itself each time, but that's tomorrow. Tonight is only tonight. The city breathes. You breathe with it. In, out. The sweetness of the sugar plum, long since dissolved, still faintly on the back of your tongue. The clean surface of a tooth maintained. Both things together, in a mouth that is learning to live with what it has and take care of it, and understand that the gap where the molar was is not a failure but a fact, and a fact can be worked with. Sleep comes the way sleep always comes when you finally stop resisting it. not as an arrival but as a realization that it was already there. The watchman calls the quarter hour. You don't hear it. Good night.